And so it really does give me a tremendous amount of pleasure to introduce who I think has been one of the best governors this state ever had, and I sure wish he'd run for it again. and a truly great Secretary of Agriculture for 8 years under President Obama, Tom Vilsack.
Well, I want to thank Jim for that kind introduction and certainly for your warm welcome. You know, I agreed with Jim Reardon on everything but one thing. But, Senator, you'll get a kick out of this. I don't know what got into Senator Reardon at the time, but he wanted to bring back 6 girls basketball, 6 on 6. Jim, that was the only thing I disagreed with you on, man. They can play as good as the boys. Better. It's great to be with you. When Jim called and sent me an email asking me if I'd do this, I couldn't say no to Jim. He was the kind of state senator. Herman is following in his footsteps in the sense of having a very liberal agenda and proud of it. He was forceful in the Senate. He voted for all the right things. He cared deeply and passionately, and I think that's why he's still involved and still engaged in this process, and that's why you're all here, because you feel passionately about the future. Jim, you mentioned our working together 20 years ago when I started running for governor, and at that time I ran because I was concerned for my children. We had Republican control of our state for 30 years. We had a Republican legislature, and Herman, see if this sounds familiar. This was an administration that underfunded K-12, that didn't adequately fund our Regents universities, that limited access to health care, that gave huge tax cuts to those who didn't need them and tax credits to businesses that didn't necessarily create good-paying jobs, didn't care about the environment. And at the end of the day, they left this state in a circumstance where we were suffering and we were losing our brightest and best because they didn't sense that there was true opportunity. That was 20 years ago. And many of you in this room decided that you'd had enough. You decided that there was time for a change. You decided the state could do better. And working together, we changed the state. We elected a Democratic governor, and indeed, we increased funding for K-12. We increased resources for our higher education, community colleges, and the Regents universities, and private colleges. We expanded access to health care, especially for children. We established mental health parity and insurance coverage. We enacted Vision Iowa that provided assistance to hundreds of communities. We embraced the wind energy industry so that it became one of our calling cards now in terms of this state. And we established the Values Fund, which was focused on good-paying jobs and only good-paying jobs. We didn't cut taxes for those who didn't need them. We cut sales tax for seniors on utility bills. That's what a Democratic administration did, and because of the success of that Democratic administration in 2006, we had another election. People in this state were comfortable with Democratic leadership. They elected a Democrat to replace me, first time in the history of the state that happened. And they elected a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, first time we'd had that combination in 44 years. And what did we do then? Well, we raised the minimum wage, we increased funding for teacher salaries, and we expanded significantly the wind energy industry. Fast forward to today. Where are we today? Republican governor, Republican House, Republican Senate, and all we have left from those glory days of 2006 when we had 100,000 voter registration edge is Dave Vilsack. I love Dave Vilsack. He's a wonderful man, but he is one lonely guy. Herman wants to do good things, and I know what it's like to be in the minority. He said it when I just came in here. He gives passionate speeches, and for about 5 minutes after you've given the speech, you feel pretty good, and then you realize the majority is just going to vote stuff that you just can't stand and you know is not in the best interest of the state. You know, we've got an administration and a governor and a legislature that has provided tax cuts and tax credits to companies like Apple. Now you might say, well, gee, Tom, you know, Apple's a pretty good company. $200 million? Really? Tim Cook is sitting on several hundred billions of dollars. In fact, I had a chance to visit with Apple officials. I mentioned I was from Iowa, and they started to laugh. I said, well, what's that all about? He said, you guys gave us more than we were asking for. That money that we're giving them means that we can't adequately fund K-12. We can't provide resources for our universities. We can't expand access to health care. We can't support our corrections system. All the functions of government, we can't adequately support the environment and the Department of Natural Resources and the good work that it needs to do on water quality. We can't do any of that in a real way. Now, we're going to hear a lot from a candidate on the other side that's going to say, we are the best state in the country. Some survey established us as the best state. Well, I've got a competing number for all of you. We're 49th in the country in wage growth. 49th. If you want to adequately fund schools, if you want to support affordable college tuition and enable middle-class families and working families to have their children have access to a great education, if you want to expand access to health care, not contract it, if you want to provide adequate mental health coverage and substance abuse counseling, not just in cities but in rural communities, if you want to protect the environment and clean up the water, if you want to attract real businesses to this state, if you want to continue to expand renewable energy, you can't be providing tax credits to companies that don't need them, and you can't be providing a tax cut to people that don't need it. I don't get this. I mean, if I were in the state senate today, as I was back in 92, 94, 96, I'd be tearing my hair out. How is it, maybe Senator, maybe you can explain this, how is it that we just said to the Regents universities, 2 of them, not all of them, 2 of them, they're going to have to do with less money. Within the same week, somebody's proposing an over $1 billion tax cut. How does that work? One year you can't balance the budget, you got to cut, and the next year you're offering people $1 billion of tax relief. How many people, by a show of hands, think they're going to get significant tax relief from $1 billion tax cut that Herman's going to have to vote on? Show of hands, come on. Oh, come on. Really? Not a single person? Of course not a single person. Because it's skewed. Right. Right. You know, the reality is a lot of multimillionaires will tell you they don't want the tax relief. So this is an agenda for a limited, small slice of our state, when the rest of our state struggles. So all of this, and I'm not even going to get into the federal situation. I mean, it's just too easy. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, no. It just. I don't know what administration to respond to. You know, which tweet to respond. I mean, it's sad, it's a sad state of affairs. I would say I've traveled in the last 4 months, 3 months. I've traveled to China. I've traveled to Brussels. I've traveled to London. I've traveled to Dubai. I've traveled to Dublin. 5 places. In all 5 places, the level of respect for the American government, not the American people, still tremendous respect for American people. Still a desire on the part of so many people in so many parts of the world to want to be like us. But they are so troubled by this administration and by the president. They are so troubled about the nature of America First. They don't understand it, they don't get it, and it concerns them. And they're beginning to look elsewhere for alliances and friendships. We're losing the values that are important to this country, that define who we are and make us proud to be Americans. So all of this is to say this is an incredibly important election. I would say this is the most important election of my lifetime, and I know that you hear that, but I ran for office. My wife Christy ran for office. We thought those elections were pretty doggone important. My boss ran for office, President Obama. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm here today to tell you that this has never been a more important election. Never, ever in my lifetime. We have a job to do. We've got to reset this state in this country. So, an incredibly important election, and we have extraordinary candidates up and down the ballot. We have a terrific primary season with great candidates who care passionately about this state, who have traveled the state, traveled congressional districts, traveled legislative districts, all for your support. And eventually, we're going to have a nominee for governor. We're going to have nominees for our congressional seats and our legislative seats. And one of my requests tonight is to make sure that we do what needs to be done the day after this is all decided. Now, you're all going to be passionately supporting your candidate of choice, and you should. But at the end of the day, the most important thing we can do the day after is to unify as a party. Unify as a party. When we don't, they win. When we do, we win. Simple proposition. So I've got so many friends in this race. Christy and I sat down and we said, you know, we can't support anybody. We support all, because they've all supported us. What could we do in the meantime? Well, here's what we've been doing. We remember what it was like the day after my primary in '98. We weren't a united party, and for all intents and purposes, we had no state party. The state party chair had sort of left, and left without any money. In fact, we had negative money. And you know, our negative money, you know what that's all about. Pretty hard to get excited about a November election when your party's broke and it has no chair. Now, we were fortunate. I think, John, you stepped up, and we began the process of putting the party back together, but it took some time. We don't have time to waste here. So Christy and I decided in January we'd bring some of the larger donors of the Democratic Party to our home and explain to them that, yes, you've been given a lot of money to candidates and you need to continue to do that, but this is the most important election of a lifetime, so you better do more than you've ever done before. And we decided we would do more than we've ever done before. We gave 10 times what we normally give to the party because we wanted to send a message. We asked the party, what could we do? They said, well, the most important thing to do is to set up a coordinated campaign to allow us to establish regional offices and field offices in all parts of the state, not just in the highly populated areas, but as importantly, in all of those small communities that are so important to victory. We can't afford to lose rural counties 90-10, 80-20 as we have sometimes done. We can lose them 55-45, we can lose them 60-40, and we win the big populated counties and we win statewide elections. But you can't win unless you have people there, unless you have a presence, unless you have people constantly drumming the beating the drum for the Democrats. So we said, what would it take? And they said, well, right now we need about $250,000. And I said, okay, we'll raise it. Now I'm a little rusty with call time, but I've been at the party office, and we are able now to say we will establish regional offices. We'll open 20 field offices, eventually 30 field offices. We're going to staff them with 60 folks. We're going to have volunteer coordinators. We're going to have a coordinated campaign. So the day after this is all decided, our candidate's going to have a functioning party apparatus with resources to continue all the way to November. Second thing we did, I panicked after I left the ag department. You know, I used to say to people, I said, man, you stayed there for 8 years. Yeah, I said, you know, I had a pretty good job. I was afraid I couldn't get another one. So I immediately said yes to just about anything that walked in the door right after I left. And one of the things I said yes to was the Working America Education Fund. It's affiliated with the AFL-CIO. They're concerned, as I am, about this incredible attack on collective bargaining and on unions. You know, frankly, it isn't just public workers who get hurt by this. We all get hurt by it. You know, who are these people? These people, when we're trying to figure out how we're going to get to the office on a snowy day, these people are out at 3 o'clock in the morning putting their life on the line, clearing the snow. There's some bad folks in our world, and they protect us from those bad folks. There are people who are in need of significant health care and mental health assistance. They help those people. They work with those people. They help cure those people. These are amazing people. We shouldn't be attacking them. We should be celebrating them. We should be congratulating them. We should be thanking them. So I decided to get involved with this Working America Fund, and so I go to the first board meeting, Jim. I sit down, kind of look around and see who's on this board. Jane Fonda. Who knew? I don't know if you folks have seen Jane's recent TV program with Lily Tomlin and Martin Sheehan and Sam Waterhouse. I went up to her, I said, you know, Jane, I said, the guys are pretty good in that show, but you and Lily are terrific. Frankie and Grace, it's great, it's funny. She appreciated that. So we sat down, and they started talking about what Working America does, which is it goes out and it actually engages people in conversation. It goes to door, and it doesn't basically say to people, you know, you're wrong, and we're right, and here's why you need to vote with us, or here's why you need to do a little more research. They go and they say, well, what are you thinking? And they say what they're thinking, and then the person at the door says, well, what if we gave you some additional information, just so you have it? And they establish a relationship, a trusting relationship, which is really important in this day and age of politics. You see what's happening, and which our party needs to address first before the Republicans figure this out, is we've had such extraordinary accelerated change in technology and in markets and in the climate that it's sort of outpaced our capacity, our institutional capacity to deal with this rapid accelerated rate of change. So we need to be the party that removes the anxiety that's created in that circumstance. I mean, that's why we have anxious folks out there. They see this change and nobody's telling them how they're going to handle it, how we're going to guide you through it. That's what government does. And Democrats are in the best position to create that plan, to make sure that we have access to lifelong learning, to make sure that healthcare doesn't prevent us from changing jobs. It allows us to deal with a relative that's dealing with substance abuse so we can focus on getting them better and focus on making sure we're productive. I mean, that's what government can do. So I hear this knocking on the door and I think, gosh, that'd be great for us. So I raise my hand and I go, well, how much would that cost? I said, well, you know, a couple $100,000. So I thought, well, maybe we could raise a couple $100,000. I don't know. So I'm thinking about that, you know, and of course, raising a couple $100,000, as these candidates know, is no simple thing. And just as I'm about ready to think, well, maybe this is not something like, Jane puts her hand up and she says, you know, if you raise $100,000, I'll write you a check for $100,000. Candidly, honestly, I thought, Hollywood. She's not really going to do that. Her check arrived the next day. So that made me ask the question, how rich do you have to be able to write a check for $100,000? So now the pressure's on me, and I've gone out and I've raised the money, and we actually have a functioning canvassing operation in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd congressional districts, and in some of our states and areas, where we're going to do the same thing they did in Virginia, that moved the dial in that governor's race by a couple of points, that has moved the dial in none of these special elections in other parts of the country. So Christy and I have donated to that, and Christy and I are involved in that. So this is what we've been doing. We're helping to strengthen the infrastructure while we decide who our standard bearer will be. And then we're going to help unify the party, and then we're going to go after these folks, and we're going to win in November, because we have to. So what can you do? Every single one of you has a voice. Every single one of you has a network. Maybe email, maybe Facebook, it may be whatever, but you all have access to other people. And right now, the way the world is, those other people will trust you more than they will trust anything they see on TV, anything they get in the mail, anything they hear on the radio. So we have, what, 100 people in here? Every person contacts 20 people or 30 people or 40 people they know, and it creates a conversation and a relationship about the importance of this election. In this room alone, could be the difference in statewide races. In this room, that's the power we have. But you got to speak up, and you got to speak often, and you got to be passionate about what you say, not judgmental, not we're better, they're not. Things are changing. The Democrats understand how to embrace change, how to manage change. It's time for a change. You know, I said when I was running, it's time to rotate the crops. Maybe we bring that back. I don't know. It's time. Boy, we've been using the same rotation here for the last 7 years, and it ain't working. It ain't working. Second thing you can do, and you've done it tonight. You've given money. You need to continue to give until it hurts, and then you need to make one more contribution on top of that. Now, I told you that we've stepped up, and I'll tell you, it's not easy for us. When I thought about leaving the administration, at one point I went to the president, and he said, you know, why are you thinking about leaving? I said, well, Mr. President, I have a new definition of optimism. And of course, any president is interested in a new definition of optimism, so he said, what is that? I said, it's a 30-year mortgage when you're 65. You got it right away, and so did he. But the reality is, when you spend 30 years in public life, as Christy and I have done, it's not easy. You make sacrifices, but we're willing to make that sacrifice. And we're asking you to consider doing the same for all these great candidates. Because every dollar matters. Every dollar matters. So you use your network. You help unify the party. You use your voice. And you give until it hurts. And then you volunteer. And you don't just volunteer in your neighborhood, as important as that is. But it is important for our party to campaign everywhere. Just campaign in Polk County or Story County, as important as they are, Johnson County. We got to go everywhere. We got to go to Northwest Iowa. Yeah, we do. You know, there are good folks up there, and there's some Democrats up there, and there's some people that would want to be Democrats, but they're a little shy about it. But if they see you come up, they go, you know, we need to listen to what they have to say. I can guarantee you, if we're in all four corners with aggressive efforts, and we're showing passion and energy, we're going to do really, really well in November. Now, we got to be for something. We can't just be against something. It's not enough to say, Trump this, Trump that. Forget that. We got to be for something. And we can be for something. The other side can't be. They've run out of ideas. They're retreads, tax cuts for the wealthy, tax credits for businesses that don't need it, restrict access to health care, privatize Medicaid, hammer the collective bargaining rights of people who are working hard to protect you and care for you. It's their same agenda from 20 years ago. We need to be the party with the new agenda. We need to be the party that says, yeah, we understand why you're anxious. We understand why that middle class has been squeezed, because change has occurred so fast. We need to have a government that's going to be able to allow you to manage that change. We want to be your partner. We want to help you help us grow this state. And I think if we have that kind of message, that positive message, we're going to do just fine. Now, I'll finish with this. 20 years ago, it was about my kids. I think everybody's got to have a personal reason for being in this business. I've got grandkids. And some of you may know, we lost one of ours. She was a risk taker. There wasn't a chair or a sofa that she didn't climb on the back of and jump from sofa to chair to sofa to the ground and doing cartwheels. She had no fear. We got 3 other incredible grandkids. I don't want those kids, 2 of them growing up in this state, where politicians are shortchanging their education, telling them or their friends that they can't have access to health care, making it so impossible that only the rich can go to Iowa State or University of Iowa or UNI, or private college for that matter. I don't want them growing up in a state that is mean, that looks for ways to twist the knife into in unions, and people work hard, taking care of us, and caring about us. I don't want them to grow up in a state that has this incredible landscape with incredible water resources and just basically say, we're going to do it on the cheap. I don't want them living in a state where it's more important to give major corporations that don't need money access to hundreds of millions of dollars in tax credits when we're begging for teachers to put into their own pocket to buy supplies. I don't want my grandkids to live in that state, and I don't want my other grandson who lives in Colorado to live in a country where the rest of the world thinks we're bullied, where the rest of the world doesn't look at America as a beacon of hope and liberty and equality and opportunity, where they begin to think that it's not about coming to America anymore because we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in that country that wants to bully people. I don't want my grandkids to live in that country. And I suspect you don't want your children or your grandkids or the kids you care about living in that state or that country either. So every one of you, think of someone that you care about, some young person you care deeply about, and ask yourself if you wouldn't do anything and everything for that child or for those children. And then realize what this election is all about. It's about doing everything you can to make sure their life is better. That's what Democrats do. I expect you to do it in November. I'll be there with you.